Hello, everyone. It's your girl, Columbia. How are you? I'm fine. Let's get into it. So, today I'm hosting a friendly debate between two dear friends of mine, Kristi.
Hello.
And Jody.
Hey.
On the question, is the modern halfway awake here, guys. Is the modern anti-feminist movement substantively different from past anti-feminist movements? Now, Kristi will be arguing in the affirmative. So yes, they are. And Jody will be refuting. No, they aren't.
Nope. Swap.
Swap.
Did you say that they were, Jody? Sorry, I've prepared that they are not the same.
And I've prepared that they are the same.
Okay. That's okay. As long as we've got two
that around, guys. That was a fuck up for me. Sorry, guys.
The second now, I thought I'd got it completely wrong, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
I just freaked out my two guests. So
no, because I'm going first, and it's normally affirmative, but I've asked if Jody can go first, and so it's all kind of weird. Yeah. So it's
okay. Yeah. So swap what I just said because I'm too lazy to say it again. So in terms of the format, each will have an opening statement followed by two response rounds, and then each will be doing a conclusion. And after that, we'll be opening up the floor to both Kristi and Jody to ask questions to one another, and the chat will be able to ask questions as well. For the chat, I ask that you please hold any questions until the chat portion of the debate, because I will not be watching the chat until that moment. So I won't see your questions until then. And if you're addressing a specific person, please add that person's name into your question. Okay, so let's get into it, ladies. Okay, so we agreed that Jody will be going first. So Jody, go right ahead.
Okay. Sorry if I look a bit weird. I'm trying to read off a screen and my eyes go weird, so
it's fine.
Bear with me. I believe that anti-feminist arguments have stayed pretty much the same for as long as there has been feminism. To talk about this, we're going to have to go way back to the suffragette movement, starting in the 1800s. There was mainly men who didn't want women to get the vote, and one of the ways they tried to combat this movement was with cartoons and adverts aimed at guilting women into leaving the movement, telling men not to let the women in their lives join the movement, and to try and discredit the people already in the movement. In short, they tried to make gaining votes for women a threat and a joke at the same time, a sentiment that has carried through to today. The cartoons in question depicted the suffragettes as ugly, bitter old women who haven't been kissed, and of wives and mothers neglecting their families to pursue a frivolous cause. They would also focus on the women's place in both the home and society, and argued that women's suffrage threatened the status quo. Once women gained the votes thing, sorry, I misread that. Once women gained the vote, things died down a little. That is until the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Second wave of feminism. This era marked the rise of women fighting for equality in the workplace, bodily autonomy, and sexist behaviour to stop. Therefore, the rise of feminism prompted pushback to feminists, as I don't believe there was a name for them at the time. These anti-feminists used a very similar propaganda to try and halt the rise of feminism as they'd used 40 to 80 years prior. The anti-feminists would once again try to guilt and scare people out of the movement by saying that feminists want to destroy the family unit by neglecting current families or by not getting into relationships or having children at all. In their eyes, wanting access to birth control and abortions meant that women were going to become more independent, which in turn would ruin society as they knew it. They would also try to shame both men and women by saying feminism emasculates men and that women should know their place. This was also the era of anti-feminists telling us that women already have rights, so we have nothing to fight for, and that other women have it much worse, so we should be thankful for what we already have. Now I've got the historical context out of the way, I can focus on what anti-feminists say today. The anti-feminist arguments can come in many forms, from cartoons and memes to articles, videos, and the comments found beneath all these. Common arguments you'll find are very reminiscent of earlier anti-feminist arguments. Often you'll see depictions of and comments about feminists as ugly single women who can't get laid, which, as I said earlier, is an argument that dates back to the late 1800s. Another argument is that male men that support feminism are weak, beta, and emasculated, which leads on from the earlier argument that feminists emasculate men. Anti-feminists like to point out that they think feminism is a frivolous cause because women already have equal rights and that women in other parts of the world have it much worse. These sentiments have been some of their main arguments for decades. They will ignore the fact that while women may have it worse, feminism is for everyone, even those who live in other parts of the world and experience things differently. Ignoring and twisting what feminists have to say is something that anti-feminists do a lot. Their arguments often rely on fallacies and have done since the beginning. I believe that anti-feminist arguments have stayed the same, but under different guises depending on the era and the issues feminists are working towards at the time. Neglecting the family has gone from meaning literally neglecting the family by not being there to wash and cook and care for them, to controlling their choice to have a family, to being lesbians and only wanting to be men they emasculate. The argument of being unattractive and brash hasn't changed much at all. It's only got more graphic as time has gone on. Not being kissed turns into not getting laid. The focus on petty things has gone from thinking a woman's vote is a wasted vote to thinking the tampon tax is a ridiculous issue. The phrasing may have changed, but the sentiments remain the same.
Excelente. All right, Kristi.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank LadyColumbia for hosting our debate today, and also to Jody for agreeing to debate me on this issue. Now, full confession is in order. The fact is that I fully agree with Jody and everything she's just said. But the fact is that we wanted to have a debate, and we decided to debate this question. And to challenge myself, I'm taking up a position that from the start I didn't initially or sort of instinctually agree with. I've had to work up an argument to counter Jody's very good argument, and I think I may have made an argument so good I may have convinced myself. All right, so we've been asked to debate, does the modern feminist movement is substantively different from anti-feminist movements of the past? And my answer to this question is yes, it is substantively different in how it counteracts feminist activists. I agree that in terms of the arguments put forward, anti-feminists of today and yesteryear have a lot in common. There's a lot of overlap. Feminism is, at its core, a reactionary position that seeks to maintain male supremacy over women by limiting women's roles and keeping women in minorities in fields such as politics or business. But what is very different today, I would argue, substantively different, is the way that anti-feminists go about their anti-feminist activism. A lot of the history of feminism has been the history of white feminism, let's just face it. And so the focus of the backlash for white feminists from white men was primarily limited to gender roles and gender role norms. First and second wave feminism included a lot of real life activism, the sort of out of the house activism where you have to go into the streets to protest, or you leave and go into a meeting of other like-minded people. And that sort of concentration then of public activism led on to the confrontations with taking place mostly through the media, whether in newspapers or magazines, articles, letters to the editors. The debates were really taking place more in the public sphere. Even when women were marching, it wasn't like a civil rights march where they were getting hosed down by the police. So there was a very different kind of approach because of first and second waves focus on white feminism. But today's feminism, at least the feminism that I associate with and the feminism that I'm proud of, is intersectional. It should take on the issues of the nexus of race and class, of racism and sexism, of class and sexism, of trans issues, of gay issues, of any marginalized group. That is now where feminism is going. But because of that, feminism is increasingly a target of racists and people who use libertarianism as an excuse to not care about other people's quality of life. Today's anti-feminist movement is substantively different because we've blended the lines between the public and our private lives through social media. Now, one doesn't have to open up a newspaper to see an anti-feminist letter to the editor or turn on a talk show to watch a debate about the war on women. It comes to your Facebook feed or to your Twitter feed. Or if you're like us and you make YouTube content, it comes to your comment section. Third wave anti-feminists hunt out feminists to harass. Okay, like hashtag not all anti-feminists. But let's look at one example from the YouTube community. Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, off of abusing people and misusing facts. You know, he's been called a garbage human who stalks other people online to harass them. And let's look at some of the tactics that he's used. He uses sexually demeaning images of Lacey Greene's breasts in his thumbnail videos to make money. He blamed feminists for the murder of Elliot Rodger. Murders could have been prevented if women had just had sex with him. Carl set up an online fundraiser, committing fraud by using the name of YouTube feminist Steve Shive and his image, until the online charities fundraising site took down his fundraiser as fraud. Carl sent the tweet, "I wouldn't even rape you, Jess Phillips," to a member of parliament who was a victim of sexual assault in her teens. He took a picture of a woman at work for the crime of wearing a t-shirt that said feminism and posted it to his followers, who then harassed this woman. And of course, he's obsessed with Anita Sarkeesian, so he flew all the way to America just to film himself sitting near her in a front row. And most recently, he participated in and laughed at participated in a hangout and laughed at the murder of a woman simply because the man who shot her and she herself were atheists as well as feminist activists. We haven't seen this kind of livelihood before. Carl's made a profession out of stalking and harassing feminists, and especially women feminists online, but feminists in general. And that's very different from anything we've seen in the past. We aren't used to seeing intellectual failures who can't read beyond headlines have a mass following of angry online trolls who want to be fed a series of victims that they can bully. Activism in the third wave quite different. It's much more in our personal space. People can find us and they can try to harass us online unless we block or report them. It means that, our friends might be sharing things to our Facebook feed, or people just other people might see things to their Facebook feed that are really sexist or racist or offensive, problematic, and that might be causing stress in your friendships. So in closing, while the aims of anti-feminists are still the same in terms of what they substantively want in terms of the past, comparing first, second, and third wave feminism, what I would argue is that feminist activists today themselves up to disagreement and ridicule and other forms of harassment that we've seen in the past, but also doxing, swatting, and years of online abuse. It makes their work, I think, and our work here in the room, because we're the people on the front lines doing this too, even more admirable. Thank you.
Alrighty, ladies, those were great opening statements. Now we're going to move on to refutation. This is our first round, so feel free to respond to whatever portions of excuse me, sorry. Feel free to respond to whatever portions of Kristi's opening statements you want, Jody. I'm leaving the floor to you.
Okay. I do think you've got a pretty good argument there, so it's going to be a bit hard to refute. But I wanted to mention that you say that the public and the personal spaces have mingled, so that you're targeted through wherever you go, whether it be online, offline, whatever. But back in these, even though it was a lot harder to do this, women would be followed home from meetings, they would be fired from their jobs, and their partners may even leave them, and families disown them if they found out that they were suffragettes or trying to fight for the right to vote. So I think even though it's a lot easier to do that now, that's always been the case. just obviously on a smaller scale, because like you may only have like your village know about it or your town know about it, whereas obviously now it's the whole world potentially. But I do think that it's been a problem since the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to respond to that, or like, do you want to make a few more points, or?
That's the only point I came up with at the time. I may think of something else later, but I have some notes written down, and that was the thing that like popped out at me. So,
I think that's a very good counter argument. This is going to be like an appreciation society. We're like, that's such
yeah.
a good point. Gosh, I really admire that. No, you're entirely right. I don't want to give the impression that suffragettes or other women in the second wave have not. Obviously, there's been. I don't want to diminish women's struggles. I think maybe a better, more refined point I could have made instead would have been to say that the kinds of women who get dragged in now are not just the most obvious activists and the people who put their opinions out there in very bold ways. That women, I think there was recently some woman took a picture of her and her friends drinking milkshakes, and they work at a comic, some kind of comic job, and she posted that on social media, and suddenly she got bombarded with hate just for putting a picture of her friends up online because of the industry she was in, being the comic industry or the gaming industry. Statement and treated it as such. So I mean, I think you're right. I stipulate entirely that it's not as if abuse and harassment is new to third wave feminists. And women have suffered in order to get the vote, in order to get our rights, in order to advance agendas. Women from all backgrounds and from all different positions. I just think that because of the internet, my main thesis is it's really it's the internet what did it. It's the internet it's transformed the way that people can be harassed for being feminists in ways that didn't exist before. So I guess, can I then throw back a question to Jody?
Of course.
Yeah, thanks. So just picking up a bit on the things that you talked about, over time with the anti-feminist aims, would you say that as have been won, anti-feminists have had to retreat and reorganize their objections? Or do you think that even fundamentally, I mean, I saw Kevin Logan, I don't know if, sorry, just a little shout out to Kevin here, has just done a video on the International Conference on Men's Issues from Australia in 2017, subtitled DerpCon 2017. But there is actually, he's got clips of a woman in that group who's saying women shouldn't have the right to vote. So for Jody, in your perspective, like, do you think that we're still battling the fundamental core of women's humanity, or do you think that we've won on some issues and the anti-feminists are sort of shifting their goalposts as we move forward in time?
Honestly, I do think that we are still fighting for the most basic things. Not so much now as before, obviously, because there have been battles that have been won, and very notable battles that have been won. But some anti-feminists, like the person you mentioned in Kevin Logan's video, yeah, they're still arguing about the battles we've already won. So then we feel the need to still have to refute that, even though it's been kind of over for decades or whatever. But I also think that as we move forward, no matter what battles we've got ahead of us or that we're fighting at the moment, anti-feminists are trying to battle us on that as well. So it kind of depends on the anti-feminists you come across. Some may not believe that we should have the right to vote, and then we have to say, well, actually, yeah, we should, and we do, and it's a good thing. And other ones may be like, why do you want pockets in clothes? And we're like, well, because of this. So it's kind of I see it as it's very dependent on the anti-feminists that you come across. Some may be more traditionally minded, some may be more like, okay, well, they've got all that done, that's fine, we can't change that, so now let's focus on what they're trying to do at the moment. So yeah, I think it's a very personal thing.
Okay. Like I said, ladies, good responses. You guys are keeping time well, so I'm basically useless here.
No, we love you. We need you.
barely, dear. Okay, so now we're on to some round 2 responses. Unless we're counting those as round. We're on to some round 2 responses. So anything that Kristi wants to respond to, ask of you, she may. These will be 5-minute responses. And after this round, we'll be moving on to conclusions and any questions that you two want to kind of openly ask each other. I probably will get in and ask a couple of questions. And then we will get to the chat if there's anybody in there. So let's get in.
Who's going first? Is it Jody first or me first?
You'll be going first.
Me?
Yes, you.
Okay. Well, I don't really have so much of a prepared response because I don't have a lot of things to complain about. So maybe what I'll take the time to poke Jody on a little bit is, and this is maybe a bit unfair because, in all honesty, I'm not a gender scholar, and so I use gender theories as a political scientist, so I read about them, but I don't profess to be, an expert in Butler or anyone like that.
Right.
And what has really, I kind of started to make this argument based on the internet thing, but the more I reflected on it, the more I started to compare the kinds of discourses feminists are willing, some feminists, maybe more specific. White feminists who started to, or who have in the past, realized that if you just focus on pay and reproductive rights, you are not doing even half of the job of feminism. If you just focus on, issues of, and there are important issues. Domestic abuse is an important issue. Contraceptive excess is an important issue. Abortion is an important issue. Planned Parenthood is an important issue for women's health in America in particular. But I can see how it's this sort of bourgeois, middle-class, white concerns, white women who don't want to pay a lot of money in order to get their contraception, white women who want access to abortion. And I think the transformative part of third wave feminism is really lifting up a lot of other voices and giving the stage time to other people. And then because of that, I have been experiencing a lot more of a backlash because of my associations with other people. So I see more of what my friends who are feminists are going through and how they are anti-Semitic slurs, racial slurs, transphobia, and all of these other things make me more invested and more embedded, more contentious and more aggressive, and I think more potentially violent. Not on the sort of Antifa side of violence, but just, like threats of swatting and doxing people. These kinds of things are just crossing a lot of lines. So in terms of, your perspective on that point, Jody, I would be interested in your analysis of, do you think that because of intersectionality and people like you and me are becoming exposed to the lived experiences of other people, that fundamentally changes the kinds of ways we experience anti-feminist harassment compared with, let's just say, white women before us, especially like in the UK and in America, where it was primarily white women who had the money and the status and the ability to take time off to do all this activism. So I'm just wondering if you think that third wave section brings in a unique amount of harassment or change to the movement that we didn't see in the first 2 waves. It's a very long 5-minute question.
It's a very interesting question as well. And now it's going to be an awkward silence while I try and think of my answer. Thanks, Kristi. Sorry, can you sum up the question, like in a nutshell kind of thing, so I can
Yeah. Do you think that? Sorry. Now, of course, I've had a drink and now I've got to clear my throat. So if we say that substantively anti-feminists are the same as they were in the past, would you acknowledge that there are elements of the reactions against third wave intersectional feminism that are unique because of the way that it then brings in homophobia, transphobia, issues of ableism, and also the marginalization of migrants or foreign residents, foreign women?
Okay. So yeah, it has changed because obviously times change, not basically everything is fluid, and with different like minorities and stuff getting involved in different things, then of course there's going to be a lot of pushback targeting their specific kind of niche, if that makes sense. But I also think that that is something that we've seen in past waves as well, like with in the second wave feminism, quite often we're calling a lot of feminists lesbians, even if they weren't, because they thought that was a, well, at the time it was a, but like a way to, is defame the word? Yeah. So yes, I do think it's got worse, and anti-feminists will try and pick out the things that they think, okay, I can go after that little thing right there, and it's easier to find out like buttons are to push, I guess. But I do think that it's something that has been progressively getting worse, as opposed to it's a brand new thing that's come with like the internet age and stuff. I think that like Black feminists back in second wave feminism again, racism against them, as well as anti-feminism for the sake of anti-feminism, and
Jody, you've got 1 minute.
Okay, and queer people getting abused for, because of that, and basically anything that they could perceive to poke at, they would poke at. So I think it's got worse, but I think it's always been kind of in the background there.
Good job, Jody.
Hey.
All right, Jody, is there anything you'd like to ask Kristi, or in response, or just poke her generally, or?
No, I think I'm okay. Thing right now, so I don't want to just be sat here trying to think of something and letting the whole thing go stale.
You're fine, dear. Okay, so what we will do now, hold on, I gotta go back to presenter mode. Okay, so we will move on to conclusions now. Both parties will have up to 5 minutes for their conclusions, and then we'll be opening up the floor for general questions. If Kristi or Jody want to ask each other questions, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. Not really, I only have one. And we'll be opening up to the audience. If they have any questions, certainly we'll ask. So that'll be our very next segment, guys. So we'll be ready. Okay. So, Kristi, would you like to do your conclusion, or are you already muted? Jody, would you like to do your conclusion first, or who wants? I'm just throwing it out there. Who would like to go first?
Well, I went first for the opening, so I think Kristi can go first.
I think that's fair. All
right,
she can have the last word.
That sounds fair to me, dear. All right, so.
Well, to close, I would just say again, thanks to the moderator and to my interlocutor and to the members of the audience. Of course, of course, Jody's got very valid points that the arguments, the fundamental core of anti-feminism has not really changed over time. It fundamentally adheres to gender roles, gender norms, claims of essentialism, what men and women, of course we're talking about cis women in this case, who they really are and what they really want at their core. And that women want to have babies and men want to go out and work, and that's what we should just let people do because it's our natural inclinations. And obviously that whole package of ideas and patriarchy that goes with it is completely wrong. So, you know, Jody, I don't want to say Jody's wrong. What my point would be here is to say that in terms of their arguments, but the substantive difference is the way that it's being carried out, and the fact that it is more reachable, that more private citizens are being drawn into it or being targeted by it. People's personal lives who are not necessarily involved with these culture war issues are being victimized by it in ways that before you had to be a member of the group, you had to sort of stand with it. And so I think that both the broadness, the reach of the internet and social media has fundamentally transformed anti-feminism into a profit-making industry on par with sort of a Tea Party stuff and the Rush Limbaugh things. And this is the first time we've seen that sort of marketization of hate directed at feminism, you know, that was actually like an ongoing television thing. And I think because of this, it has changed the nature of how we interact with each other and the nature the nature of activism, and also the risks that people take on when they do decide to become a voice for these issues. So my position is not that Jody is wrong. It's my position is that when you narrowly define substantively different as engagement, that we can both be right.
Oh wow, it's Kristi's out here making it happen, guys. I'm like, oh my god, do I even understand what Kristi's saying? Because it's kind of it's early for me, so I'm a little over my head. But I got my brain just caught up. So Kristi, amazing closing statement. Jody, I know you're gonna wrap this up, great girl. So let's hear what you got to say.
Well, it's quite a lot to follow that.
Right.
But say thank you for and it's been great.
Aww.
And it's been a great first experience at all for me, so yay. But in conclusion, I do agree with a lot of what Kristi's been saying. It does seem like with the internet, it's brought a whole new slew of problems and a whole other, not world of anti-feminists, but it's connected everyone a lot more. And yeah, things have got worse in that respect. But I'd also like to say, I may just be summing up what I've said already, but I do think that it's always been there. Even though it's a lot worse now, it's always been there, and I think the arguments have stayed, obviously adapting a bit to the times and everything. But yeah, I can't think of what else to say. So I think I'm going to leave that there and hope that it's okay.
Well, I think that's an excellent conclusion to. Let me click off because Mama's trying to do too much right now. I think that's an excellent conclusion to your points, and that's all the conclusion is, just summing up what you said before, honey. So we have concluded our debate, ladies and gentlemen. I think Kristi and Jody have done an excellent job of presenting their points and refuting one another as best as they can. It's a difficult topic that they chose. So it is what it is. I do have a question that I'd like to ask them both as we open up to the chat and questioning one another. Can one commit to the cause of anti-feminism without harassment or the use of propaganda? Can you be an anti-feminist and not turn it into a profitable industry or use it as a platform to harass people? Is that possible? So,
Jody, do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah. I think it is possible, but it's rare. Most arguments that I've seen, at least, have resorted to using the memes and all this. But I do think it's possible for someone to be an anti-feminist and go solely on the arguments without dragging anyone's name through the mud and basically doing what of anti-feminists that I've seen do. But yeah, I think that it's a rarity, and I've only seen a handful of those types of anti-feminists. Mostly I've seen the defamatory language. I can't word. The arguments that I've said throughout this debate.
Sort of more the inflammatory language a bit.
Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha. I can see that. Kristi, what do you think?
Yeah, I would tend to agree that it's in theory possible. And certainly we've seen centuries of anti-feminist rhetoric coming out of the churches and other religious authority positions of power or podia or pulpits or whatever, where it's less about harassment and more about moral condemnation and social pressure, trying to use more subtle ways of controlling women and men through that. So in theory it's possible, but but in a secular situation, I think of somebody like a Rush Limbaugh, who coined the term feminazi and has basically been shaming women and demonizing women for profit. And and I think Jody's right. I just can't think of anybody. I mean, in theory, it's possible to have somebody who could be a very polite, respectful anti-feminist who could you could engage with and make arguments with. But I don't think that there's an audience. I don't think there's an audience for that kind of anti-feminism. What there's an audience for seems to be people who are angry. I think the population tends to skew male, but not exclusively. I think they tend to be more right-wing in their politics, and they have a sort of pack mentality of wanting to go as a group and mass downvote videos, mass brigade comment sections, go and dogpile on Twitter because they feel a strength more powerful when it's a bunch of them against one person. And I think that's a problem with anti-feminism, is that there's a lot of power dynamics that are happening on the side of the anti-feminists. And a lot of that has to do with toxic masculinity, which is feeding the problem notions of what it means to be man, and that violence is okay, and anger is okay, and harassing people is okay, but admitting that you are sexually assaulted mentally, you should be ashamed, or men can't be raped, or if you had sex with your teacher when she was 34 and you were 14, you were lucky. It's that kind of mentality that we're trying to actually get into, but it's also the driving force behind the kind of bullying that we see. So I think it is in theory possible, and maybe there are even a few people who make good anti-feminist arguments without reducing it down to the C word. Cross them yet?
Well, again, our ladies have produced such good answers to our questions. I just feel like I'm useless. I might as well just be in the background somewhere. Anyways. So I thank you guys for coming. I want to thank you guys for showing up and debating. I think this has been a relatively fruitful debate. At the very least, we've shown that we can debate one another, and it's not a matter of you're a stupid motherfucker and I hate you.
Hashtag robust feminist arguments.
Right. So I definitely appreciate it. Of course, I am happy to have you guys here always. If there are no more questions, i.e. for Jody to ask Kristi or Kristi to ask Jody, I'm kind of done with my questions. I'm going to open it up to the audience. All right.
Yeah, let's see if there's anybody in the chat.
All righty. Oh, we've got some people in the chat.
Oh, excellent.
SJW 101, the political gamer, asks, would you say the slow economic decline of the West is related to the uptick in online anti-feminism / anti-SJWism?
Yeah, I think, if I can jump in on that one.
Sure, go ahead, Ben.
There's certainly an issue of economic alienation and the sort of the taking away of the traditional male roles that has fed a lot of insecurity, because on the one hand, you've got a society that still teaches that it's honorable for men to be providers, and that means be working outside the home but not being a father inside the home, and if you are inside the home, be a disciplinarian. And at the same time, the kinds of jobs that would provide a man with a path for doing that through manufacturing, with basically a high school degree, those jobs are going away. And so you're seeing men who are, their wives or their partners are getting economic, in some cases, they're even making more than them. And of course, this is some sort of dissonance, which might lead to some sort of frustration, which is then perhaps in theory could be directed at women and other feminists who are working to advance women's opportunities and women's rights, because they're still like not quite there,
Right.
as the problem, easy target. So I think that I would say that, I think that there is a link between economic anxiety with the loss of those sorts of high paying jobs to otherwise, with people who haven't gone into specialist training, and that kind of angst directed at feminists and other groups, other minor or marginalized groups, people of color, people who otherwise they feel like immigrants, people who they feel are getting advantages over them when they're really not.
Gotcha. Excellent answer, Jody. Anything you want to add, or anything you want to?
No, I basically agree with what. But I do think that a lot of it is kind of taught from like their fathers or their grandfathers or whoever. So a lot of it is like passed down frustration. But yeah, with the economic climate, that's not helping at all, I don't think. But yeah, I basically agree with what Kristi said.
Well, I don't disagree with what Kristi said at all. I think that all I would be saying would be reiterating what she just said. So I'm not going to go into it, because I agree with her totally. So Rez Please asks, do you think that feminism is also financially incentivized, not only on YouTube, but in the real world?
Did you say anti-feminism or feminism?
Feminism.
Okay. Am I answering first?
Oh no, honey, it's whoever gets to it first.
Okay.
I'm fucking
Okay.
I'm trying to think of an answer right now. All right, but my brain is like, feminism. What's that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again? Because
of course.
My brain sometimes turns off for no reason at all.
Honey, we're all there right about now. Do you think feminism is also financially incentivized, not just on YouTube, but in the real world?
I think it might be, but not to the extent that anti-feminism is, especially with YouTube. You see a lot of big anti-feminist YouTubers. They seem to gain subscribers a lot more quickly and retain subscribers, and they mainly say mainly the same things. And so on YouTube, definitely anti-feminism is more marketable than feminism, in my opinion anyway. but I do think that feminism is also quite a profitable, especially since I don't want to say feminism is trendy at the moment, but like a lot more people seem to be getting into feminism recently, like in the past, like, I don't know, 5-10 years. And so there's a lot of like merchandise out there, like the hashtag feminist t-shirts and this is what a feminist looks like t-shirts, and there's a bigger market to have that sort of thing. So I do think that feminism is profitable, but online definitely, I think anti-feminism is more profitable.
Okay, I can agree with that. Kristi, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. No, I want to like sort of agree slightly. I think I'm going to restate what you said, but in just a slightly different. The concept of feminism sells. So you can get girl power t-shirts, and you can get, you know, other things that are marketed toward the idea of feminism. But that goes to like people who make t-shirts and people who make slogans. If you look at, I want to call it like the outrage industry. It's something that has been going on for a long time, and it's just expanded into YouTube, and the kinds of people that have gotten into it are slightly different. So just going back, if we think about, and I'm going to focus on the United States here, the rise of right-wing radio taking over sort of AM talk radio in the United States, they kind of cornered this not quite mainstream market, right? You have the mainstream media, and then you have FM radio, which plays music, and then AM radio, which is talk, which is dominated either by sports or it used to be a lot of right-wing talk. And through that, they were able to, you know, draw a specific type of demographic, a very male demographic, a more rural demographic, with more high school education than other levels of education. And they created a, you know, sort of a bubble around this industry of blaming Democrats, blaming women, blaming the liberal media, blaming other people for your problems. And oh, by the way, you know, because the world is going to hell, buy some gold. Its value and when the revolution comes, apparently. Or here's some ginkgo biloba, or here's some garlic pills, or, you know, here's a water filtration system to keep out the chemicals that make the frogs gay. So we saw this whole industry that was built up with books that people don't really read and are terrible, like Bill O'Reilly's books. And as AM radio has died, of course, that demographic is dying along with them, but they're taking some time. What I see is just that YouTube has become the new AM radio, and that the same kinds of people who were buying gold bullion off of the Rush Limbaugh show or the Michael whatever, Smerconish, is that the guy? Or any of these other right-wing people who basically say the same things every day. That their kids are now on YouTube watching Bering and Sargon and Paul Joseph Watson. That's the difference. It's not the message or even the messengers. It's just the media through which they get that message. And that's why we see channels that are pretty small explode if they're given a shout out, because it's a demographic. You know, if you think about who is on YouTube, tends to be younger, tends to be whiter. Although that's changing. I mean, I want to say, you know, in terms of internet access, actually, the first problems in the 1990s and the early 2000s were people actually getting access to the internet physically. Then we had mobile phones, which democratized it a lot. But, you know, there are still people who, if you can't afford it, there are issues of, you know, just getting on the platform anyway. So you have a pretty homogenous demographic group that tends to, you know, move from channel to channel consuming the same content. And that's where the money is. It's getting that money out of that group. And you can see the interrelation of anti-feminist money when Dave Rubin was crying on Twitter because 100 of his patrons quit Patreon because of the Lauren Southern thing, because, you know, he's a liberal. And, you know, so what I see is yes, you can make money off of feminism if you market feminism, but if you want to make money personally, if you wanted to start a business, I would be much better off financially by being the next Jordan Peterson, by selling out my dignity and my credentials and saying, you know, stuff that the sort of Christina Stahoff Summers says. I could make tons of money if I were to red pill. because I've got a PhD and I'm a woman and I could be a recovering feminist. You know, I mean, I could make so much money that way, but I would rather have my dignity. So I think that there is money to be made, but the ways that people make that money are very different. One is at a corporate level and one is more at a sort of personal cult of personality level. I think I went over my time.
Well, I wasn't keeping time for our question responses. Nobody told me that we were going to be doing that.
No. Okay, if you were, I was like, if I've got 5 minutes, like, cut me off.
I agree with both those points. I think that it's, you know, if there are a certain segment of the population that are profiting from T-shirts that say, you know, I'm a feminist and I slay. But it's not like that money is going to feminist organizations. It's not like that money is going to, you know, Planned Parenthood or the National Women's Organization, you know, National Organization of Women or what have you. So it's sort of like you can profit from it's not like you profit from T-shirts that's, you know, have Mary Wollstonecraft quotes on them either. You profit from identifying as a feminist, but not from feminism, not from feminist theory, not from you know, the words of actual feminists or the policies that a feminist attempt to promote. And in terms of whether it's profitable in the real world, I think it is. I think that you see corporations and you see large businesses attempting to profit from feminism by advertising, look, we pay our women the same as we pay our men, because they want to ensure that women continue to buy whatever product they're selling. And they want to ensure that women worldwide are still paying attention to their advertisements. So I do think that in terms of the real world, feminism is profitable. Just not for feminists, right? Just not for the, you know, the gender studies major, unless she's willing to, you know, take the red pill. So that's, I shouldn't be getting involved as the moderator, but I'm getting involved now.
No, I think when the debate part is over, I think, you know, we're kind of chill now. At least I don't have a problem with that. And plus, I'm interested in your thoughts. So
I thank you. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the matter.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you
to Eric and to Rez.
Thank you guys. Trust me, we've got more fucking questions. No one wants to let me sleep. I'm sorry. No, I appreciate you guys, audience. Don't think I don't love you. I do love you. It's just Mama thought, oh man, I could be back in bed by 10:30.
Yeah.
Anyways.
After this, we're like, we're going an hour and then I'm back to bed. Like, I love you, but I love my bed more.
Right. No, I wanna get through the questions. I know people have gotten up and whatnot to come and ask us stuff, so let's get into it. Okay, so SJW Gamer 101 asks a follow-up question. Also, what role do you believe that social media plays in forming the impression that radical feminists and social justice is prevalent in society? And is this impression a true one? Honey, you're giving up 3-4 questions here. Jeez.
I think Jody took the first one, so I'll take the fast one. Rapid fire response. Okay, so what was the first part of the question?
The first part of the question is, what role do you believe that social media plays in forming the impression that radical feminism and social justice are prevalent in society?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I got that. All right. This annoys me to no end when people don't name names. And I know that there are times that you don't want to say so-and-so said X because you're going to like start off a whole beef with them again. But I think it's more beneficial, like I did in my speech personally, to say, here's Carl. And here's lots of shit that's Carl's doing. And Carl's making like tons of money being a shitty person online. Because it then, when I say anti-feminist, Armored Skeptic can't go, well, she's talking about me. And Sheer Head can, well, she's talking about me. Like, no, I'm talking about Carl here. I mean, if you do the same thing, then yeah, you can paint yourself with the same brush. But I think in social media, because people take extreme examples and then mainstream them, Heaven video where they talk about what feminists are doing and what all feminists think and how all feminists feel about X. And, you know, I do this on Twitter too. I'm like, well, who says these things? Tell me some names of people who say these things. Because if if you say so-and-so said this, well, then I can be mad at so-and-so. I can take it up with so-and-so. I can object to the first principles of so-and-so. But if you tell me feminists do this, well, then suddenly they're like, that you're telling me think this thing. And I think it's lazy. I mean, I understand why we do it. We do it as heuristics. And we, I do it too when I talk about on Twitter, I'm Bearing fans. And then I don't put hashtag not all Bearing fans. But when it is possible, when you do have the word count, I think it is important to be specific. Or if someone makes a vague accusation, ask for a specific example, because it is a very common tactic to take an extreme and make it mainstream and make it pretend like the extremists are the people who are normal. And the way to catch, I think the best way to catch people out is say, well, who said that? That's what I try to do. And I want to walk a line between, yeah, we need to use heuristics at some point, but if you ask me, I have a list. Like I have a list of some of the comments and the screen caps. So I'm not talking about 1 or 2 Bearing fans. I'm talking about 100, 150 people that I can show you easily. So when I say Bearing fans, I know what I'm talking about, but I can back my shit up on that. And I think that problem of people making sweeping generalizations and not being able to back it up, then yeah, it creates a situation where there's a rhetoric that makes people sound on the margins a lot more like they are the dominant group of the dominant thinkers in that movement. So Jody, I don't know if you, the other 2 questions, sorry.
The other part of that question is this impression a true one?
Oh, and then no. Okay. Then I can give you everything.
Yeah, that's easy. Jody, what do you think, hon?
Yeah, I just want to say that we're not a hive mind. Like feminists, we all have individual ideas. So when someone says feminists do such and such, or feminists say this or believe this, it's just like Kristi said, who thinks this? Because I know that my views might not be the same as someone else's, and I don't expect them to be the same. So yeah, I think that you need to back it up with specifics, or just if you see a feminist, a self-identified feminist say something, screen grab it. You don't even necessarily have to put the name or anything, and just be like, well, here's the example I'm talking about, and then go from there. Because I know that there are differences between different feminists, and yeah, so social media has kind of played into the whole, this is what all feminists think, and then everyone's getting that information and then believing that that's what all feminists think. I think I might just be reiterating what Kristi says at this point.
Well, we're gonna be reiterating what each other say. That's fine. That's fine.
But yeah, no, I don't think that it's a accurate representation at all.
I totally agree. I think that what bothers, I think that I'm looking at it from a different perspective, and my perspective is from anti-feminists who crow about the radical feminist. Well, which radical feminist? Whose perspective are you talking about? Are you talking about Bell Hooks' perspective? Are you talking about other more radical feminists? Are you talking about third wave radical or second wave radical feminists who think that we should become lesbians, in a way to break men's ownership of our sexuality? What are you talking about in terms of radical feminism or radical feminist thought? I'm tired of people saying feminism. I'm tired of particularly anti-feminists saying feminism, yet having no idea who the prominent authors of feminism are, what the first wave is, why the waves are just delineations made about time and not necessarily about theory or us actually fighting for different things. I really want anti-feminists to start doing some research and actually go to a gender studies class. You want to be an effective anti-feminist? Go to a fucking gender studies class, take it, get a C, and learn who is who are the most prominent and effective figures in feminism, and then you can come argue with me. But don't come arguing with me, asking me every question on earth about, well, who is this? What is that? How does this work? What is feminism? That's your job. It's your job to understand feminist thought. I already do, and I can demonstrate that. Nobody can come arguing with me until they can demonstrate that they understand feminism well enough to do so. That's how I take it. Sorry, guys.
Hell yeah.
No, don't be sorry.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, don't apologize for that. I was like sitting here going, woo, silent applause symbol.
Yeah,
But
like we're not Google.
Right. I'm not, just ask Google. But I think that the moment that they do, the moment they go to the Plato Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and they actually look up what is feminism, what do some of these feminists think, they're going to find themselves saying, I kind of agree with that. I might agree with that. And then,
or I have no idea what that means, and it's going to require me a lot of reading to understand this in the first place, and that's work.
right?
You know, like feminist philosophy can get into some pretty deep stuff, and just because you read a word doesn't mean you understand the it's not might be the dictionary meaning. You might have to go read an encyclopedia, like the encyclopedia from philosophy from Stanford, to understand what that word means. And so
right, you may have to get off Encyclopedia Germanica for 10 fucking seconds, right, and actually go read some real shit. And I would be happy to tutor anti-feminists, right? But you got to be willing to do the homework, boo.
And you got to be paid for your time and expertise, because you know that's what people do. They get paid for their expertise. So yeah, you want to sign up and pay me tuition? We'll create a course for you.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. But you know, give me $500 and you know I can share that around and we can talk about it. But let me move on. I'm trying to go down. People are kind of arguing in the comments with each other. So let me see if I can find an actual question here. No offense, guys. Nick, I love you, honey. I've been the bear is not invited to my channel. Right?
No. Hell no.
The bear is not invited to my channel.
People into your party.
All right, they're asking each other. I'm not gonna answer that. Here's a basic here's a question that you have to answer yourself. How are women not equal to men? Are you talking about and the reason, and Nick, I'm not trying to be an asshole to you. I really like you, but here's the issue. Do you understand what you're asking, right? That's a question that can be answered politically. I can tell you how it is that men and women don't stack up politically. I can tell you how men and women don't stack up socially. I can tell you how men and women don't stack up physiologically or biologically, right? There's a difference. There are differences between us, right? But at the end of the day, I could sit here and go on and on and on for an hour about that when you could go right now and do a Google search and figure those things out. I shouldn't have to be the one to tell you, right? I'm sorry. That's not my job.
Like how long do you have?
Right. Like, I mean, how long do you have? If you want to do, you know, if you want me to sit around for 3 hours and explain it to you, I can, but I was trying to get some sleep, bruh. You know, like I'm sorry. I'm obsessed with my bed, guys. More than my own boyfriend. Like, I'm obsessed with my bed.
Can I do a little humble brag? But yeah, I went and got some new bedding, and my bed is so because this is basically my bedroom. And yeah, like I love my sheets in like my bed now. Oh, that's so nice. It's like it's not quite the Egyptian cotton that's really smooth and soft. It's a little more rough, so it's a little more clingy when you get in at night. It hugs you when you get in. Oh yeah, but it's not like the flannel that's really clingy. You'll sort of like the winter flannel sheets. But I get why you love your bed, because I love my bed too.
Right? When you get the correct.
I just got some pillows.
Go babe.
I just got some new pillows and it feels so good. Like I don't wake up with neck ache anymore.
Ooh, see, that's how you know. That's when you really start to love your bed, when you're not waking up in pain.
The little things in life,
right? And I love my lumpy, like I do. I don't care. I wake up and my hip hurts and I'm just like, oh, I don't care. I still love you, lumpy. Me and my bed are too close. We're in a relationship that borders on like cheating, you know what I'm saying? So I won't get into it. I don't want to share my bed's business too much. All right.
Well, can I just come up on Nick's point here that,
Sure.
you know, I think it's important, people who want to learn about feminism, if you're going to ask feminist questions, then you're actually going to have to listen to the answers, and you're going to have to be open to reading assignments. Because an easy way to think about the way that we conceptualize equality is to think about the world that we live in different spheres, right? This was something that became very much of a sort of a word of the 1960s, 70s feminist movement. The personal is political. The idea that there is a private sphere and a public sphere is something that we might not have called it that, but we understand the idea between your private life and your public life. In the 1960s did say that what they did was to say that what happens behind those doors in people's privacy is as political as the things that go on outside of it, especially with regards to marital rape, domestic abuse, distribution of household tasks, things like that. But it's not just a public-private divide, right? If we think about it, people have their economic lives, so there's an economic sphere. We have our political lives where we vote and we do our activism, or we don't, and that's also, you know, a form of non-engagement in politics. You're making a choice. Then there's people's religious lives, the religious sphere. And then there's just your social relationships and how you act. So we've got the public-private divide, but within that, even that public sphere, we have political, social, economic, and religious. So if you want to say, in what ways aren't men and women equal? Well, just look at the religious sphere. Look at who runs all the religions. It's not women. Then you can look at the political sphere. Who is running for office? Who gets elected for office? Who gets the chairs, positions? Who runs? Who, you know, makes political decisions? Disproportionately men. So you can look to see measures of equality in terms of equality of representation based on your proportion in the population, which should be 50-50. People's population distribution should be represented in the institutions that represent them. Then there's a lot of ways you conceptualize equality, and that was what Lady's point was. She could talk for 3 hours, but if you don't have a concept of what you mean by that, or if you're just trolling, well, obviously that's going to be a waste of our time. But for people who are sincere, it does require that you think about the kinds of concepts that feminists use in order to organize the world and understand things, and not just dismiss them out of hand.
I agree with that 100%. Jody, honey, is there anything you got to say? Because I'm gonna give out one kind of last spat to the chat, and then I'm out.
I'm just agreeing.
Yeah, we've been going
with
for
everything.
an hour and 10. Oh my gosh, we're useless at fighting.
Right. I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I'm literally agreeing with both of you. Like, I don't think I have anything left to add. It's all been said.
Right, and the chat is just evolving into Game of Thrones. So, and I love them, and I love Game of Thrones, and and like I said earlier, I've seen the leaked episode. I've seen it 7 times.
I'm so jealous.
I've seen it 7 times, and I'm not gonna spoil anything. I will say it's amazing. Tonight is the night. You guys will be so happy.
I'm just glad I cannot see the chat because, like I said before the thing, I'm still only halfway through season 5. So
right. Well, honey, don't worry about them. You're in a good space, actually. You're in the best space because the tension of, oh my God, it's almost Sunday. Oh my God, is murder. Like on Saturdays, I'm sitting there freaking out, like it's almost Sunday. Oh my God, I get to sleep in Game of Thrones, right? So,
and you only have to wait years for the season 7. Like
yeah.
I've been following, so you have to wait an entire year or more sometimes for the next season.
Right?
Like I've been watching The Handmaid's Tale on Channel 4, and it ended last weekend, I think. And every week it was just like, oh my God, I cannot wait a whole week to watch this. And I mean, I know I could have gone online and found them online because I think they were on Hulu as well, but I was watching it with my mum and sister, so I had to wait for a whole week, and it's just like, oh my God, I cannot wait a whole week. But then I had to, and now I have to wait a whole year till the next season comes out. It's just like,
right.
Yeah, I think I might just sit down and binge watch Game of Thrones for a couple of days.
Trust me, I wish I know when I started watching Game of Thrones, and I said we're going to devolve into it. Fuck it. Okay, so last push from the audience before, because I will go into Game of Thrones just immediately like that. It's like a default for me. It's disgusting. Are there
officially end the debate, and then we can go on to Game
yeah. Let's end the debate. So. You have 30 seconds. If there are any other questions you'd like to ask of me, me or the guests here, feel free to ask them. But I'm wrapping this up. I want to thank my guests. Kristi and Jody are awesome. You guys, their channels are in the description. Please go subscribe. They are wonderful YouTubers who make content I very much enjoy. This has been exhilarating and fun and exciting, and I hope this has given everybody sort of a good form. This is how, this is sort of how debates should work. Debates shouldn't be shouldn't necessarily be super vitriolic. Of course, if you're passionate, you're going to disagree, but I think we've given a good model here for how a debate should go. So I like to thank my guest. I like to thank the audience for showing up. This could have easily just been 0 viewers and nobody gave a damn, but I appreciate you guys showing up and having questions and talking to us. So yeah, I am going to say that is the end of our debate. They just want Game of Thrones now. They're like, fuck feminism, Game of Thrones.
Okay, can we have a Game of Thrones chat then?
See, we're gonna have a separate Game of Thrones chat because I'm too tired at this point to go into all the stuff, and I'm scared. I'm scared I'm gonna let it go. Like my boyfriend was bitching at me about, you saw the episode in advance. You're gonna be pissed because you got 2 days now where you can't talk about it, and I'm like, I'm getting to that point where I'm like, I need to talk about this. It's so awesome. I need to talk about this, but I can't spoil anything because everyone will be pissed.
Also, you mean can we do it where the meteor hit and kills everyone?
I won't. I can't even. Don't even ask me. I won't even talk about fake spoilers because that's how I am right now. But I'm going to end this and
another GOT.
Yeah, and we're gonna
GOT sometime this week.
We're going to do a GOT, me and Kristi. And Jody, you're of course invited to come and talk Game of Thrones. We'll cut it off so that you can't hear the spoilers, all right? We'll make sure that we only talk about, because that's what we did our first one. We kind of only talked and we compartmentalized it. So we can compartmentalize it for you, babe. I have been the LadyColumbia. I will see you guys soon. Good night, good morning, good afternoon.
Thanks.